gonna come up this week, but I like messed up my back a little bit, so
Oh, damn.
I have to make it this week. But next week I'll be there.
All right. Hopefully, I'll see you then next week. Oh, wait, no. Next week, I'm actually in Buffalo for work.
Yeah.
That sucks. Um, anyway, we're live. Thank you so much for joining me, Zach. We are here doing an interview with former Bellator bantamweight champion, UFC contender, and all-around great guy, Zach Makovsky. So thanks for joining me. We're interviewing you for thefightsite.com. Come check us out. You're going to be treated to just a plethora of phenomenal work by fantastic analysts and writers. So please check it out. How you doing?
I'm doing good.
For those of you who don't know, Zach and I actually train at Marcelo Garcia. We're both Marcelo Garcia purple belts, so that's pretty cool.
Brown. Brown.
Oh yeah, you got your brown belt. I am trailing. God damn it. No. All right. So the first thing I want to ask you is something that, I actually have personal experience as well. You came back and just had your first fight back since tearing your ACL. I've torn my ACL as well. The recovery process can be something. So the first thing I wanted to ask you is, how do you feel since coming back from that? Just physically, mentally, how long did it take you to feel right?
I mean, I'd say it still doesn't feel completely normal, but it feels strong and everything. The thing is, I had some complications with my hip post surgery. So like my hip, I've had hip issues before before I injured my knee, and then when I tore my ACL, I don't know if it was like through compensating for a while or just like not using my hip much and kind of just working on knee flexion for the first month and a half, 2 months, where it just got so much tighter, and it still affects me to this day. So I'm like doing more rehab for my hip now than my knee, but the whole process was very difficult. Sitting out for a long time with really no training, and then just like easing back into it, and then as you up the intensity, it gets difficult. You feel like you've lost how many steps, and it's just a battle coming back. And I didn't fight for 2 years and 3 months or so. So it was tough, but being back in there was a really good feeling, and I'm happy to be back and trying to squeeze a couple years out before I officially hang it up.
Yeah, I know everything you just said. I know, not on the same level, obviously, in terms of competitiveness, but I know that feeling all too well. Just sitting on the couch or in the bed, can't do anything. You're miserable. You want to get back in the gym. People are getting training in, and you're just not. And I can imagine even just coming back and then also getting that win, even better. So there's that, like you said, you had those hip issues. So do you feel that we see tons of different injuries all over the sport, and sometimes you'll hear certain fighters seem to be more conducive to injuring themselves with their knees and hips back. Do you think that there's specific styles and ways of training that make a fighter particularly geared towards having issues of a certain kind? For example, I know, I think Chris Weidman has had a ton of back and neck issues, and he has a specific style of the way he fights. Pretty much he's tried to change it in recent years, but he had a style coming up and during his championship run. And I guess Dominic Cruz, obviously, with the knee issues. Do you think that there are certain styles that lend themselves to those kind of injuries?
I don't know. I actually don't know why Weidman had so many neck issues. I think it's really, it's certainly a extremely physically demanding sport on your whole body. So your joints, your brain, everything's going to take a beating through the process. You try to mitigate everything and be as safe as possible, but the nature of it is, I think, your body's going to be under stress. If you have some kind of physical issue, then maybe you're more predisposed to one injury over another. But I think overall, it's just the nature of it. I think what fighters in general need to do, and now I'm finally doing after it's too late, is is just like being more proactive about taking your care of yourself and not letting anything little get compound to become something of a larger issue. You know, just like because like I'm in the same stance. I've wrestled right leg lead. I'm a southpaw when I fight. So like my front leg and my back leg are constantly doing different things. You know, I'm using my posterior train on my back leg more and my quad to catch the weight and go backwards on that. So I need to like constantly pay attention to that imbalance in my extra training and kind of try to reverse it. You know, so it's just stuff like little stuff like that, and trying to be smart about keeping my body healthy and as loose as possible all the time. So like right now, I do like an hour to an hour and a half of mobility and stretching work every single day because it's just what I have to do to be able to do what I do. So I think if I was more proactive earlier, it might not have gotten this far.
Mm-hmm.
So my advice to any young up and comers is take care of your body proactively and not after you already have issues. Yeah.
That's fantastic advice. And that actually leads into another question of mine based off of that. Do you think fighters should be more willing to pull from fights? Because I know that, it's pretty much notorious that fighters have gone into fights. Every fighter, of course, goes in with injuries and something's hurting them. But there are a lot of times where fighters will be like, well, of course, this has to do with needing the money, obviously. But do you think fighters should be more willing to pull themselves out of fights if there's something that is actually affecting them and could compound into a more serious issue? And is it more just like fighters need the money and that's why they're just choosing to do it? What do you think?
I mean, I think it's probably a case by case scenario,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I mean, most if you're fighting to make your living and maybe you were injured and you pull out, and then you're still not 100% healthy when you get the next one, and you're kind of on the fence, but now you already pulled out of one, so you need it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it depends on what your priorities are and what you're willing to risk and what you think if the benefits will outweigh the potential downfall. I think it's really hard to say just as like a blanket like
Right.
you should be willing to pull out more often. I think it's different for different people. I don't know.
All right, that's pretty fair. Yeah, it's definitely going to depend on each fighter, in each situation. So, um, like you said, you mentioned earlier that
I
you.
think I'll add on to
Oh,
that.
go ahead.
Ideally, if we weren't so reliant on uh, like every individual fight as a paycheck, and then not even knowing if you're going to be guaranteed one after that.
Right.
If we had more kind of like backup thing, like some kind of net supporting us, we'd be able to make overall better decisions for our health and longevity than having to kind of make these difficult judgment calls that I don't think there is a right and wrong answer to. It's just where you're at that particular time and what the priorities are and where you think it can lead you. So I don't know.
It's interesting you mentioned that because what you're describing is kind of like your typical sports league where you get paid for being in the organization, period, whether you're injured or not. And if you get injured playing, and then you're still getting paid, and that allows them to make sure they heal up, make sure they can come back. Do you think that that's something that should be a focus? There's all this talk, obviously, of fighters unionizing, specifically with the UFC, or Fighters Association, different ideas, the Ali Act being extended to MMA. Do you think that that's something that maybe fighters should start calling for, or do you think an organization might be formed that could take that route and pull some really good fighters away from these more typical organizations that pay fight by fight?
I mean, I think it would be a good thing for all the athletes. I don't know how it's going to come about, but I think ultimately it will have to. But I don't know if it's going to be a promoter that does it or if the fighters will eventually band together. It's been being talked about so long that I'm
Mm-hmm.
kind of skeptical that it will change anytime soon. But I hope so. I think it's a necessary step for for all the fighters. So
a step towards growth in a way that would allow also to get more high-profile athletes from other sports as well. Because right now, I mean, nobody who's can go to the NFL or NBA might step into unless they have to, I guess, for various reasons. But 10-10 is the current standard, I think, starting UFC paycheck. So
as far as I know, yeah.
yeah, 500K to be on the sidelines as a practice squad in the NFL, you're not going to come there. So I think that something has to happen eventually in order to make this sport continue to grow in the way it should, honestly.
Well, I
So
mean, the UFC is obviously the leader, and
mhm.
the problem is, well, one of the problems is that, if you try to make a statement like that, there's 1,000 people waiting to take your spot. So if you're not like something that they hold of incredible value, there's 1,000 guys waiting to take your spot that don't care that you're trying to do something for the collective good. They'll do anything to get in there too. And it's just kind of the way everything's structured right now. It's hard to reach the highest level, so people willing to just climb all over you to get to the spot if they have to.
And once you get to the highest level, you're no longer necessarily interested in losing that success that you may have gotten in with the fear of the backlash, or you've gotten comfortable until after the fact, I guess, when you're done. And sometimes that's already too late.
It seems to me the guys that, if they made a stand, could actually make a difference are the guys who are being paid very well. So I don't know. The struggle is real. I don't know how it gets fixed.
Like you said, it would take a big name and enough people, enough actual volume of fighters to really do something. Probably, I think you're right there. Retired fighters would be great, but fighters, it's going to take a big name. It's going to take a champion. It's going to take something like that. I think you're right. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
So I do. You've been making that cut. You used to fight at 135. I have to actually, before I move on to some other stuff, I'm curious. I will get fired if I don't ask you the questions from the Fight Side crew. So I'm going to sneak these in as just like basic questions that are just questions. Kyle, who's one of the founders of the site, he's a boxing historian. I don't know if you've read any of his stuff. He's phenomenal. If you ever want to talk boxing with someone, he's your guy.
Yeah.
This is for both flyweight and bantamweight. He asked, who was the best all-around fighter, the guy who you would consider the toughest fighter, and the hardest punchers in each respective division that you would, if you can parse that out.
That I've faced, or just my
that you faced,
general?
yeah, that you faced.
Okay. What were they again? Hardest puncher?
Let's start our hardest puncher. Bantamweight, flyweight.
Probably Dodson. But it was a different kind of feel. It wasn't like it's hard to describe. I've tried to describe it to people, and I don't really have a good way. I felt like people who like it feels like you're getting hit with like something thudding, like it's. I don't know if this is the right way to like a heavy-handed like that. You know that I don't.
Yeah.
I wouldn't describe Dodson like that. It was like his punch had a lot of energy. I don't know how to explain it. It wasn't like dense and like thudding, but I just felt like there was more energy when he in the punch than I felt in anyone close to my weight, for sure.
More the acceleration of the actual object than the actual mass behind it.
Yeah, I don't know. It was like the impact maybe was quick, so the force was dispersed quickly or something. I don't really know exactly, but his punch felt like it had the most energy. That's how I'm gonna describe it. I don't know how to describe it.
That works. That could count, by the way, for bantamweight too, considering his career, if you want. The other one was the other two were who was the toughest guy? The guy who would use that word toughness, I guess, to describe them. Not necessarily the best, but just. If nothing.
I don't know. I don't know how to quantify toughness in people.
That's fair. And the other one was best all-rounder. Guy who just like was everywhere.
I I feel like Eduardo Dantas was probably the most technical
Mm-hmm.
and well-rounded. Like he had a good distance control. He has excellent kicks. His jiu-jitsu is great, right? He
Mm-hmm.
choked conscious, and he even kind of he in this one situation out wrestled me to get me on my back. He hit like a switch, which surprised me when I was hitting a takedown on him. Um, so I think he was probably the most technical guy I faced. Um, mm, Toughest, maybe I would say, if I have to go back, it'd be like Benavides or Ortiz, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
uh, just because they were kind of like relentless. It's more
Right.
relentlessness than what maybe toughness,
You can never
but,
stop.
but they're like constantly coming after you and not
Mm-hmm.
weighted by anything.
That's what made their fights in general, both of their fights together, probably just 1,000 miles an hour. It was great. That second fight I remember watching. I was like, oh, this is a fight I could show non-grappling fans and they'll enjoy it, right? Um, the so let's just quickly pivot. What are your thoughts? Very brief. What are your thoughts on the not bantamweight, the flyweight situation as it is now, considering what you've seen happen, like with the initial TJ Dillashaw coming to close down the division, Cejudo saving it, quote unquote, and then just
Leaving it.
booking to bantamweight. Yeah.
I don't even know what the situation is. What is the situation of the UFC flyweight division?
Right now, it's
Benavidez,
Benavidez and Figueiredo fighting for a flyweight title.
but how many people do they have signed in the division? It's like not many.
Yeah, I think they might have, I think they do have a top 15 now. At one point, it was like 12 people,
Yeah, I
but I
remember
think they
it
got up over 15 now.
went from like 40 or 50 guys to like 12,
Yeah,
and but they're like we're not getting rid of it. So I don't know. I don't really know what's going on.
I'm wrong. They have 14 ranked flyweights.
Yeah, so that's
Uh,
everyone who's in the UFC is ranked.
Basically, if you're
Yeah.
in the UFC, you're now you're one of the top 15 flyweights in the world. That's just how it works.
I don't know. I don't know what's going on. I think the UFC dropped the ball on the division. I think there's plenty of talent, uh, and there's ways to generate interest in the fights. Uh, but I don't think they did a good job of that.
I completely agree with you. I mean, just taking the DJ just as an example. This is a guy who has his own Twitch stream with a significant following on Twitch for gaming, and nothing. No pumping up of that aspect of it. I don't know if you follow gaming at all, but the industry's massive, obviously, and there's tons of people that could have been reached out to. I actually remember seeing him. He went to one of these gaming channels, played some GTA 5 with them. Did really well. Hundreds of thousands of people saw that. I don't understand how you can't market that. That was the complaint. Oh, we can't market. We can't market. How do you market them? You find things that draw people in, and you work with that. Like what? Take yourself as an example. Something you might like doing outside of fighting. It could be anything. Why not use it? You know. Um,
Yeah, but I mean, even outside of that, just like they didn't do anything to generate any kind of like storyline or like
Mhm.
any kind of hype for any of the guys coming up to face him,
Right.
because he was so dominant. Uh, Especially once he started defending the title a couple times. Like he had a close fight with McCall in the first
Mhm.
flyweight fight of
Right.
the UFC, right? And then that was. So I feel like I just watched that fight recently, and I felt like this is the first flyweight fight in UFC history. And remember, they called it a decision for Demetrius, but it was actually
It
a
was a
draw.
draw, and it was
And they
supposed to be
had,
a fourth round.
yes, they had a system in place, so if it was a draw, it was a tournament, so it was going to go to a fourth round. And then, like, first fight of flyweight got bumbled, and then it was like
Just set the tone, right?
foreshadowing.
The entire division's existence.
Uh, yeah, but I mean, essentially, they would hide the number. The next guy who's going to be the number one contender fight would be hidden on like the fight pass prelims, and then no one would see them fight, and then they'd be thrown in to Demetrius. Well, I feel like the other divisions, a lot of the guys get like a they'll get like a main event spot on a fight night, so they'll get 5-round experience, they'll get more exposure, there'll be this high profile event, they'll bill it as the winner gets to fight the champion Demetrius, and that never, I think, literally never happened. Maybe the flyweights headlined one event, but that was like,
yeah, I think
that was
I don't even
more
know about
recently,
that.
like a year or two ago. So I don't know. They just never did anything like that, and it was just like, oh, here's another guy who no one's seen fighting Demetrius. I mean, in general public, obviously all the fight fans know all these guys.
Right. Do you feel like it's a working theory I've had? Do you think that it's just that they didn't want Demetrius to be the guy, and because he was, once Benavidez was out of the picture, or maybe Dodson, they're just like, screw it?
As far as what?
In terms of like when sometimes I mean all the time it seems like they have a guy they want to win. Any organization really, that happens with, I'm sure Bellator, it happens with pretty much any organization where they consider a guy that could be the flag bearer for the division. Do you think that maybe like someone like Joseph Benavidez, who was linked with Uriah Faber, a Team Alpha Male, a more well-known team, or John Dodson, who was getting these flashy knockouts and just this crazy run, had the first fight with DJ. Do you think that part of it was just like the guy they wanted to win didn't win, so just bury it?
I have no idea. I'm not. I don't see why they wouldn't want Demetrius, to be honest. I thought he was one of the best fighters I've ever seen in mixed martial arts.
Oh yeah, no question.
Maybe the most diverse skill set I've seen. His strength is at a different level than anyone usually in MMA. And he's nonstop. He does not. There's no lulls. He is constantly attacking you. Man, maybe it's too fast for you to pick up everything. But I feel like there's no reason that he shouldn't have been, except for the fact that he's guy there inserting to building up any kind of narrative or anything behind it. I feel like maybe he beat a couple guys and the division was shallow on, so just picking fourth-ranked guy I'll fight him until it was too late, and now there was no time to build a storyline of give him somebody else to have him go down number 8 guy, number 9 guy. It was just kind of, it started off with a shallow group, not talent, just in numbers. And just kind of keep going deeper because it was kind of all that was left. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was like they dropped the ball from the beginning with the division, and it could have been done much better. And I think all the flyweights would be much better off for it.
Right.
Worked out.
I mean, you said it great there. So I'm going to just quickly pivot back to your actual fight style because, fun fact, Demetrius Johnson, they did a top 20 fighters of all time. Demetrius Johnson, they put at number 3 behind Aldo and GSP. So curious if you agree with that placement. I personally put GSP, but there was a vote. It was between the staffs and they put it all together. But
I don't know how to quantify these greatest things, but there certainly are 3 of the best ever.
Absolutely. So, I actually, I've tried to do some proper research before this interview, and I went through a couple of your old interviews, and you talked. This is an old interview with Mania. I think it was a while ago. I think this might have been when you were still in Bellator. What you were talking about, how you have like kind of a one-track mind with training, almost an obsession, and you were talking about how you have to try and balance things because it can affect your relationship. As you've gone on through your career, I think you're in your mid to late 30s now. Has that changed? Do you still have that mindset? Do you feel yourself like I'm more just interested in learning and doing new things as opposed to just solely focusing on that?
I think. So what did I say in the interview? That I had a one-track mind, but I think you should have a balance.
You said you talked about how it's hard and you try to balance it, and you have to have your things to kind of like. I think you said something about separating but it was, you do kind of have like almost I think the word was obsession with all things MMA and something like that. But yeah, you were talking about kind of trying to find that perfect balance between training, personal life, fighting, etc.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
I've definitely not found the perfect balance. That's for sure.
It's still kind of training, fighting, and then everything else.
Yeah. Well, it's my career, my job, and my passion. But I've definitely been able to like manage like the importance of like any one individual result.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I still care deeply about my performance, but
Right.
the actual outcome, if it's a win or loss, I've been able to dial back the stress that I used to feel just from what comes along with that, you know. But and that helps take some of the emotional stress off leading up to a fight, so I can relax more. But that's the only adjustment I've been able to make a little bit of.
So for you, like a good time is just training, and you've talked about the passion you have for the sport and how you watch tons of tape, which is something that I think TriStar is pretty well known for as well, where most of your training, I think, if not all of your training, is done.
Most of my training is now done.
Yeah. So with regard specifically to TriStar and the other places you have trained, what do you feel overall about the philosophy with regards to TriStar, both from, I guess, their guard? So I think for us, called the 1 minute guard, if I'm not mistaken. Which, you know, sweep, if you can't, you got to get up after a minute or so. And I know that a lot of the fighters that come out of TriStar kind of have a similar methods of getting up to Marcelo guys. Well, at least getting on top for Marcelo guys, because you can't just stand up in Shih-Tzu. But what is your overall philosophy with that? How does it jive with your?
You could just stand up in jiu-jitsu. People don't.
You might get penalized if it's IBJJF. Running away, how you're not engaging on the ground, suddenly you're penalized and they're disqualifying you. Unless, you know, the ref comes from your gym, of course. I'm not going to put it on recording, but I'll tell you real quick if you have time afterwards of a match I had. So how does your general philosophy for, you know, jiu-jitsu off your back from Faraz, how does it jive with your, I guess, your wrestling takedown entries and your striking? What is your overall philosophy with these kinds of things? Did you just match super well with TriStar and Faraz, and that's why you went there, or did you kind of grow into that? How did it develop, I guess?
I didn't just. Frost doesn't have like one particular like style. He has like ideas about how he thinks, but he's willing to adjust how he feels about those ideas depending on your skill set. You know, if there's someone who's incredible off their back, he's not going to make them play a sweep get-up game. He'll let them
work their bottom game.
Right. So it was just kind of the way he could blend the different techniques and how he could emphasize like not like, oh, here's a move for this situation, here's a move for this situation, but how he could kind of funnel you into a position where they're going to give you one thing or another, and then explaining kind of how to deal with whatever they're giving you. Like in sport BJJ, people almost exclusively, I feel like, pass on their feet now. But if you go to your feet and you're going to try to pass my guard in MMA, I'm just going to stand up because you're not holding me down. So if you're trying to use mobility to get around my guard, I'm going to just stand up. If you don't want me to get up, now you have to physically apply pressure on me and engage my guard, and now I can potentially use your weight. If you drive into me, I can use your weight to lift you, elevate you over my head, and then you're going to either go that way or you're going to try to retract your weight the other way. And then I just kind of have to constantly play this balance of making you react and going with the way that you're redirecting your own weight. This is just
Mhm.
one little example from guard, but he kind of has this this way of like showing you the dilemmas people are going to be put into and how you can exploit whatever they choose to give you either way,
Mhm.
and just kind of has these and it's just like it was just a different way that I had seen before from coaches, and I think he just has a deep understanding of like the underlying issues of different situations where but like I said, he's not particular that you use this technique or this
Mhm.
technique. You're free to, I mean, he'll give you his opinion, but you're free to adapt your own techniques as long as they are a solution to the given
Problem.
thing he's presenting, right? Yeah.
Right. It's it, well that answered most of my question. That Ed, the one who wrote the article about you and Joseph, so he was asking specifically about the best aspects of each gym you trained at, and then he pivoted towards what kind of fighters would excel in your mind at TriStar. But based on what you said, it's not really, there's no really specific kind of fighter that would excel. It's you come with what you have, and then
Yeah.
Faraz and they work with you.
I think it's more about how you like to learn, and kind of if that kind of like approach makes sense to you, no matter what your body type or skill set is. I think TriStar would be a good place. And it was just that's what influenced me at TriStar. Like, not, I mean, I initially went because I was a huge fan of George, but I started coming back up over and over, and eventually doing camps there and moving there
Mm-hmm.
uh, because the ideas behind the tactics were better than anywhere else I had seen. Baras's ideas just made sense to me uh, from right away. The first time I saw him teach.
That makes that. So it's obviously good to hear that you have such a high opinion of your own coach. So, and do you think that do you think that there's how would you say that like, because there are times where fighters will have public splits with their coaches, but as fans and analysts, there are times where somebody will be like, they'll feel that a specific coach or a specific camp may not be the best for them. If you were advising, I guess, other fighters, like, when would you say, like, hey, I think you should, these are the things you should look for, not just jiving with them in terms of their personality, but their style doesn't mesh. Do you have any advice for people who want to know, like, is this camp right for me? Is this coach right for me? Especially the younger fighters who may not necessarily have that ability to parse that out.
Um, yeah, I think it's hard to say. It's like um, what it's really based on what they feel like they need.
Mm-hmm.
Although you might not need what you think you need. that, that was a non-answer. Yeah.
No, it's
Um,
sometimes the fighter doesn't know what's best for them.
yeah.
So,
I, this is how I deal with it. So I'm open to learn any new thing and try something, but I need it explained to me in a way that is going to make sense, so I could see why it would be appropriate. Sometimes people just tell me to like do this, and then if I start asking deeper questions about, well, why is it this way, or what about why wouldn't I want to do whatever I would normally do in the
right.
situation? If they don't have a good answer, then I'm inclined to not believe it. It has to make sense to me for me to want to try it. Like, the theory needs to make sense for me to try to see if it's good for me personally in practice. Um, and I would say when you're very early in your career, you don't need to do as much of this questioning, because you would be stuck explaining endlessly to a white belt why all these things are. So, but once, like, I've been wrestling since I was 6, and I have a large amount of experience. If you're more advanced and competing at a high level, then I think asking questions like this is appropriate. And if your trainer doesn't have answers or doesn't have answers that make sense, then maybe you should not necessarily switch gyms, but find someone else who maybe has a different way of teaching that you kind of gel with more. I don't know.
Right. Do you think fighters should maybe, in general, this is a general question, so it could be that you just don't. Do you think fighters should, I guess, camp hop a little bit earlier in their careers to kind of find that coach maybe?
Probably not for training camps, but just like when you're not prepping for a fight, I think you should definitely go train at different places and see different stuff. I don't like doing it like I wouldn't go to somewhere brand new to train for a camp just because it's a big gym. Like I made maybe 7 or 8 trips to TriStar a week or 2 weeks at a time before I ever went for part of a training camp because I already knew what to expect and knew what the training was like. And now I can incorporate it into how I also have prepared for my fights. People who just go to a new place for like their camp and they've never been there and don't really know what to expect, I feel like that's fairly risky. You don't know what you're going to get out of your training now.
Right.
You know? So I like the idea of exploring new teachers and learning from a lot of different people. But when you're getting ready for a fight, I would say stay true to what you know. If you've been there and you like and you know what to expect and you think it's going to be helpful, then go for it.
Understood there. I want to know you said, like you said, you've been wrestling since I think it was like you're 6 years old.
Yeah.
You know, wrestling high school, college, all the way through your MMA career. Obviously, is defined as, I could think a large portion it would be defined by your wrestling and your high level of wrestling in MMA. But one of the questions I have is that your wrestling philosophy would definitely be different from wrestling philosophies we see from, not philosophy, but your wrestling style, or maybe your philosophy as well. At flyweight, it just seems to be much different from wrestling at welterweight, middleweight, light heavyweight, etc. Just that bigger bodies, more weight, kind of a slower game. So do you think that the style you use, which is, you get those phenomenal single leg entries, for example, or those double leg entries, and the way you've kind of melded it with your striking style, where I specifically remember in your last fight, you got leg kicked on your lead leg, it was kicked back, you ended up square, and then you used it to shoot a double. And it was awesome, first of all. Secondly, it was just seemed really smart, where you took advantage of the fact that this guy's kicking my legs. How did you, I guess, build on that wrestling style? How did you create it, or I guess put it together? Do you feel that it's the right philosophy for lighter weights? Because again, it's harder to hold someone down. Everyone's faster. People seem to be more athletic in general. There's a question somewhere in there, I think.
I, I don't think it's necessarily like it has to be a style that a lighter weight employs. I mean, maybe there's some small differences, but my general, I modeled my takedown game in MMA off of GSP.
Right.
I think is the best I've ever seen at entering and taking people down in MMA, and he had no wrestling background. And that's because all the entries are different. With very small exceptions, when I'm in a tie with an underhook, something I could do like a traditional entry to a leg off of an upper body tie, but otherwise, all the entries are almost entirely different. The stances are different. The range is different. So you have to come up with ways to close the gap and get to their legs and their hips. And George was the best I ever saw doing this. This is why I was a huge fan of George. Right, first time I saw him fight. And I personally don't like shooting when I'm like punching you and then trying to shoot. I try to punch to make you defend and then shoot, like a proactive takedown. I don't like that because it's so easy for them to take a step back, and I never want to shoot while the distance between us is increasing. It's a bad sign. I need you either to be planted, your feet have to be planted, and you covering. If you're covering and your feet aren't moving, then yeah, I can enter off of that. But I like really when you're coming at me, the distance is closing. You're closing. You're helping me close the distance. Um, and this is how I think George, it's essentially like counter striking, like
Hmm.
it's like jabbing people and feinting to get them to throw, and instead of counter punching them, he's just counter shooting. It's the same idea. You're like setting up how you would counter punch, except you're going to do a level change and a takedown instead of a counter punch. Um, uh, the only thing I had to do to change from George is that I'm southpaw, so I'm mostly facing open stance people, and George is mostly in closed stance. So I think there is some differences. That's why I gravitated more to the single over the double. Um, but I don't know. That's kind of how I've implemented my strategy, and I think that can be. I think that's the best idea, probably regardless of your weight class.
Those, if you're a wrestler specifically, if you're looking to implement that wrestling game plan,
If you want to take people down in MMA, I think it's the best way to do it.
let them come to you, counter under their punches, counter under their strikes, whatever it might be, when they're closing the distance essentially, or
Yeah.
when the distance is not increasing at least.
And when they kick you, it's a great
Gotcha.
opportunity. They're giving you a leg, and even if you block, they can't kick you, and they can't change the distance while they're on one leg. So
Right.
there's a moment of there's a clear window of opportunity to attack, counter strike, or this like anytime they kick, they're open to a counter potentially if you defended
Hmm.
the kick effectively. The same thing. Anytime I have an opportunity to counter strike, I can counter shoot.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to create those opportunities where I'm baiting people to counter me with certain things, and then trying to apply my takedown against their counter that I was baiting.
Right. So when so let's say uh, you're getting into you explained that beautifully, by the way. The 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 thought process behind it, though, do you feel that your style, you're very much an in and out fighter. You like you said, you base your style off of countering their movements and their attacks. Is as you get older, athleticism just starts to fade. It's just time. When do you think that do you feel like you've noticed it, or if you feel like you've noticed, like, I guess, a little bit slower, a little bit less athletic, whatever it might be, or a little bit less explosive, I think would be the better word. And do you feel that that would affect your style significantly, or are you already like working and planning towards it?
Uh, I am not counting on getting older and slower. uh, um, I haven't noticed a physical decline like in speed or reactions or strength, other than issues I have like physical injuries with my hip and
Mhm.
my leg at one point that was preventing me from doing certain things. But I don't think that was just, I think, from an injury. When I feel like I'm slowing down, I hopefully will stop fighting. uh, the one thing I'll say about uh, that I've been trying to work on, but I mean, I don't think it's come out much in fights. Maybe when I fight with Sherbatov a bit, is that so like early in my career, I was in and out, like you said, in and out fighter that would poke at you, and get you to chase me. And when you overextend, I take you down, and then I could control you and
Mhm.
down. As I started fighting better and better people, the title fights in Bellator, the fights in the UFC, a lot of those guys, even though I think I've taken down everybody I've fought, Dodson, I don't know if you're going to count the one, his butt hit the ground, but I knew from training with him he's like a human spring and incredibly
Yeah.
hard to take down. But a lot of the guys, Benavidez, uh, like I can take them down. I took Joe down 5 or 6 times in our fight,
Yeah.
but they're so hard to hold down. And I think Yoni was the same thing. I took him down 5 or 6 times, and I couldn't keep him down.
Right.
Generally, if I find the takedowns closer to the cage, They can use the cage to get up without really exposing their back. And some of these guys are just too good at getting up. You know, I hate that idea of like taking someone down against the cage and being like hugging a double leg while they're sitting. And I feel like I'm just stuck holding their legs, because as soon as I like release to punch or release to get up an underhook or head control, I've released them to get up to their feet, and then I have to take them down again. And I feel I'm essentially stuck holding their legs, and I can't advance, and they can't get up then. But as soon as I try to advance, they get up. So I feel like I get stuck in this position a lot. Obviously, Khabib doesn't. He's amazing. So we try to steal some stuff from him, but I also feel like it's not my style. Like, when have you ever seen George take people down against the cage? Almost never that I can think of.
There's always open space. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is I prefer. I prefer, if you're going to try to scramble and get up, I prefer that you have to expose your back to do it, so I have a chance to take your back.
Mm-hmm.
But so one thing I've been trying to adjust, because as I think the general level of MMA is getting much higher, mm-hmm. and the guys at the top level are much harder to take down and hold down. I have to have like the Benavidez fight, I think, was an example of this, where I felt like I could like stay on the outside, poke him, counter, move, and take him down when he commits. But now I can't hold him down. He's continuing to pressure me. He throws higher volume than me, even though I don't think he landed a ton of super effective things. He was certainly pushing the action and throwing way more than I was, and I'm stuck here landing a counter shot, moving, taking him down. He gets up, and then he's just right back on me. So I'm like, my style is very hard to fight from behind. If I lose a round, it's very hard to fight from behind, mm-hmm. by making them chase you, because they don't have to chase you anymore. They're ahead.
Right.
So I need to have more an idea of like how to be more on the front foot and kind of implement pressure, but not just getting a brawl. That's not my style either. So this is something I've been working on. I tried to pressure Yoni in our fight, mm-hmm. Because I knew he generally gets tired. And the other reason I have to learn how to pressure is because I think I've had a reach advantage once or twice in my whole career, and I'm not a big kicker, so it's very hard for me to lead. Like I have to get within range that you can hit me before I can ever hit you. Mm-hmm. So this is another issue that I'm trying to work out for us and striking coaches, and mm-hmm. watching tapes of different people and stuff like that. So
have you thought of? I'm sure you might have thought about it, but like, have you thought of like you said, now you're with Faraz forever at this point. He's your coach. Have you thought of maybe going, while not in camp, to a place that's more, I guess, known for their pressure fighters, Corderos, something like that, just to kind of like maybe work with a coach that specializes it in addition to what you're doing with TriStar, and then you can kind of take the ideas, go back and work on them with Faraz?
A good idea. I haven't really thought about going anywhere to do it, but I will now.
I feel useful again. I'm going to tell my wife that I actually am still useful as a person. Just because we now have 2 kids doesn't mean you can forget I exist. It's hurtful.
Actually, so like the original owner of TriStar is a guy named Conrad Pla. And TriStar used to be just a kickboxing gym before Faraz started going there and teaching jiu-jitsu and stuff. And he fought like Javier Mendez from AKA, and mm-hmm. like a kickboxer on that level with like the Rufuses and all them. When I first went to TriStar in 2012, and they have a variety of different striking coaches that you can kind of pick and choose to do sessions with different people and work on what you want to work on. And I specifically mm-hmm. avoided Conrad because I saw he's a pressure fighter, and I'm like, oh, that's not my style. And now I've been working with him a little more, and I'm like, I'm such an idiot for avoiding him because it wasn't my style, because I need to have more options. If my style isn't working, what's the next option? Like, I need to add tools and options to have. Not that it's always going to be my style, but there's going to be fights where I'm going to have to go forward if I'm lose a round, or if I'm fighting from behind, or I can't hold someone down. I need to have more options. So I've been working with him more, and he's been great. So I did start, but I haven't gone anywhere else. That was my point.
That's it's. I mean, you pretty much answered what my next question on that was. Do you feel you're someone who has a specific style? You have a type, you know, and we see some fighters are capable of fighting, quote unquote, against type. Now you basically said like, no, I need to learn how to fight against type. Do you feel? When do you think fighters should, I guess, put that effort in? Because if you, like you said, you had that style growing up your whole career, at what point do you feel a fighter should say, like, okay, I now have a defined style. I need to learn how to fight against type in case I need to in a fight? Is it after a few years in where you've already got the developed style somewhat, or do you think from the start, learn to pressure, learn to kick from the outside, all that stuff?
I don't know. I think it's gonna take people time to learn their own lessons. Like my style early on, I felt like I had an answer. I was faster than most people. I could go in and out. I could poke them in and out. If they don't chase me, then I can do that the whole time. If they chase me, I can take them down.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I could get up from bottom. I could control. I could pass, maybe sub, ground and pound. I felt like I had a well-rounded system that I could do everything, and I had an answer to any one tactic that was going to come at me. But when the tactics start compounding, when you're fighting better people, they're better at more things. So now, not only is this guy constantly coming at me, I can't pick and poke at him. But I also, when I take him down, he's getting up and he's back on me. And now the problems that I thought I had solved have compounded, and now it's a new problem that I don't have an answer to. And I think it just takes time to realize that. And sometimes I think I didn't even learn it from one fight. I think it took multiple fights of kind of losing in the same way, where I was like, wow, this is actually like a hole that I have that I thought I had. I thought I had a style that I could deal with, any general type of approach, but I realized I did not. So now it's something that I have to work on. But I mean, I think as soon as you realize there's a gap, there's a potential gap, then you should work towards adapting something for that also. So whenever you realize it, really.
hopefully sooner than later, for most fighters. This
But
is something.
a lot of times you won't see it with like your opponents, because until if you're pretty well rounded and you're pretty good, by the time you meet an opponent that has multiple ways to deal with you also, that'll be like you'll probably be fairly far into your career. I don't know. That's how it was for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's also for, like you said, you were faster than most opponents. You were more explosive than most opponents. So it's for a really good athlete. It could also take longer because the athleticism can kind of cover the holes, I suppose, for many fighters.
Possible.
Especially in a division that might not be known for their most athletic fighters, which unfortunately you did not have that pleasure of being an athletic fighter in a division of non-athletes. Before we wrap up, I know you have to go in a few minutes.
Yeah.
Non-fighting stuff. What do you enjoy doing when that isn't fighting related? Really anything, if anything.
I like going to a good brewery and trying all the IPAs I can.
Which is for sure always going to help a weight cut, I'm sure.
Man, my weight cuts are pretty easy, to be honest. I'm actually, after surgery, I was worried I was going to get heavy. I lost weight, so the weight cuts are easier now.
What do you walk around at?
I'm like 140, and before my fight, when I was in camp, I was walking around I was waking up like 137, 138, and having a beer every night, eating no diet, just eating whatever I wanted.
Goddamn. I'm just picturing and remembering all those articles. This fighter's just basically dead on the scale. This fighter was dead, pronounced dead at the fight. And you're like, nah, I was having beers and eating burgers.
Yeah, I mean, my last fight, my flight out of Montreal got delayed, and I had beer at the bar while I waited. I waited to fly to the fight. But yeah, but I don't have to cut that much. I mean, when I make weight, I'm weakened. But
right.
It's really just a water cut. I almost cut I almost diet down like no weight before the water cut. I maybe like 2 pounds I actually have to lose before I do a water cut. So it's really not much. And I'm a relatively small flyweight, I think, compared to the guys that I see now.
You definitely
And I used to be a
comparing
bantamweight.
them, yeah, yeah. I was about to say like I don't like even like guys like Formiga and Ian McCall, like they were just fighting on the like not the regionals, they were fighting on at Tachi Palace, which was the
Yeah.
organization for flyweights at the time, and you're just like, screw it, I'm gonna fight a bantamweight, I'm gonna fight these giants, which is insane. Yeah, you're insane, but it was impressive as hell.
Well, it got as the years went on, I ended up seeing at the same weight class the guys are getting bigger and bigger.
Well, now you have it at flyweight too. Like you have guys like Figueiredo who are massive,
Yeah.
massive for flyweights, and just I guess that's just the way the sport is going at this point. Final thing. It's just this is completely non-fighting related. I noticed that you're more well, the MMA, I guess, fan base and a lot of fighters tend to lean more conservative, for lack of better term, with political views and something like that. And you're one of the fighters that is, I would say, notably does not. Is that something from your background, or is that you grew into that at later in life? Because I come from an Orthodox Jewish background, not known for their non-conservative views, to say the least. So, and I developed it later in life. But how did you? Were you always like that? Family, or is that something you kind of gravitated to on your own?
I mean, I never really, when I was younger, like thought about politics and where I
Mm-hmm.
was on this spectrum. But as I started paying attention, I realized I'm pretty left of center on most issues. So, yeah, I don't know. Proud leftist.
That and to end it, do you think something like Medicare for All would not just benefit but greatly increase the uh, living not living experience, the life quality, I guess, the living quality of most fighters compared to how they have to deal with, I'm sure, medical issues now?
Yeah, I mean, having healthcare like provided uh, as a citizen of a country, I think
Mm-hmm.
I spend most of my time in Canada now,
Right.
and I understand all the opposition. Like, like there's wait times. Like, if I need like some kind of like a knee replacement, or like I'm older and I have to whatever. If I'm like if I don't want to go to a private care, I tore my ACL. I have to get my ACL repaired. I might have a couple month wait. It's true, but guess what? You pay nothing. And for a knee replacement, if for a knee replacement or something like that, like what's like what I have to deal with my knee that I've had my whole life for 2 more months. Like I don't understand why the weight issue is a big deal.
Enough of a reason.
Yeah, and
Just
then
so
if you want, you can go to private
Sure.
places.
You
I
can
think
laugh at me.
I
Laugh at
certainly
me with
think
this.
I certainly think everyone, if you go sick, you should be taken care of,
Right.
um, and you shouldn't have to go broke to try to remain healthy
My out-of-pocket
or alive
expenses for my
or alive.
ACL. I'm just thinking of like my ACL expenses. I remember that between my dad and I, over 12 grand. That's with insurance, full coverage, like amazing coverage. I went to HSS. So yeah, then you make a.
Yeah,
I guess
I'm probably a little less than that, but not much less than that.
yeah. No, that was the thing. The deductible was nuts. But
And I have a friend who tore ACL in she's lives in Montreal,
Mhm.
and I picked her up from surgery, and her only bill was $3 for the parking lot.
I can't think of a I can't think of a better way to end this. I'm gonna go cry and look at my credit card bill, which I still have to pay off from that. Zach, it was an absolute pleasure. I hope we can do this again in the future. Hopefully, I'll see you soon at Marcelo's. I don't know if you're going to be there past next week, but if you are, hopefully, I'll see you there. Um, that's pretty much it. Anything you want to plug before you go? Anything you want to? What are you doing next fight? If you know what that is yet.
um, I don't know exactly when. I think I'm fighting with Brave Combat Federation now.
Hmm.
I think they're setting up an 8-man tournament for the flyweight title. Believe I am going to be part of it, but I don't know when or who I'll be matched up with first. So, but I look forward to that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Zach. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, listening. Ben Kohn, the Fight Site. Check us out, support us, and support Zach. Go follow him on Twitter. What's your Twitter handle, just in
Yeah.
case?
At Zach Fun Size.
At Zach Fun Size. ZACH.
Yeah.
A very important distinction. Thanks so much, Zach. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.